Welcome back to History 371 and our study this week about 20th century South Africa. Well, really, mostly 20th century, but really the dividing line in South African history is about 1870, and that's because of the mineral discoveries, ushering in an era of what's known as the mineral revolutions. And it is going to be a revolutionary time, much like England or the U.S. under the Industrial Revolution. I mean, it's called a revolution for a reason, and it's similar in this case where we have an economic change, which is going to usher in social, cultural, and political changes along with it. And that's what happens in South Africa with the mineral discoveries. Um, and I say discoveries plural because there's going to be two. So as you remember, where we left things off is we had South Africa in about 1870. We had a British Cape colony here and a British colony of Natal over here, and two Boer republics, Orange Free State and the Transvaal in the interior, and then surrounding that still independent African groups. So what we're going to find, though, is that independence is going to be waning throughout the latter part of the 19th and into the 20th century. Um, as I said, mostly as a result of these mineral discoveries and the associated changes with those. What we're going to have is an overall chronology here. Starting in about 1870, intensive diamond mining will begin. It will become the city of Kimberley. And then about 15 years later, intensive gold mining will begin, which will be the real large-scale mineral revolution. It's going to kick off with diamonds, but then gold is going to be the thing. That is also going to be a factor in the 1910 Union of South Africa. So if we can go back here for just a bit, what we see as these separate territories of the Cape Colony, Natal, Orange Free State, and Transvaal will all combine together into one, union of a territory known as South Africa. So the pretty much the borders of what we see as the country of South Africa today will be born in 1910. We'll see 1913, the Native Land Act, this important law will be introduced, and I'll talk about that some detail in the next lecture. Part of a period of increasing segregation. And then finally, from 1948 onwards, the introduction of this policy of apartheid. And that's going to be also a pretty dramatic change. Okay, so back to the mineral revolutions. The mineral revolutions themselves are going to create mining and industrial areas in two places, and then extending across all of Southern Africa, essentially. But they're really headquartered in Kimberley, which is where the diamond mines are going to be, and in Johannesburg, where the gold mines are going to be. Although at the time these minerals were discovered, these were farmlands. There was really nothing there. Certainly not cities. They're going to grow up in a matter of a decade or less as a result of this. The gold mining operation known as the RAND is going to employ up to 100,000 workers by 1900. So I think you can see pretty clearly what kind of impact that might have. I'll talk some more about that. These will become industrial mining operations, but in doing so, what we're going to see is the extension of industry across Southern Africa and really the industrial model of economic development. And that's going to extend to agriculture. And that's something we'll see in the life story of Ende Makume also. And then finally, we'll see changes in social structure and politics in addition to the economy. But it starts with diamond mining. 1869 was the initial discovery of diamonds in South Africa. There were a few found earlier, and it's kind of weird when you think about this, but at the time, geologists didn't believe that there were diamonds in Africa. And so when they found a few small diamonds, they were dismissed. And then somebody brought in this one that was about yay big or so, 83 carats. Okay, about the size of an egg, a chicken egg. And then they realized, hey, there's something here, and it starts this. Well, you've heard of the California Gold Rush or Alaska Gold Rush. This was a diamond rush. Miners from around the world, England, US, Australia, as well as around the region, flooding into this area, um, looking for looking for diamonds. Now, where was this area? Let me show you on the map right here. The diamonds you can see on the, hopefully on this, it says right there in small print, diamond diggings. It was in this area that was contested. It was an area that was contested between the Orange Free State, the Cape Colony, and the African inhabitants of the Griqua right here. And they all made a claim for this area. And especially now because it's full of diamonds, right? Well, short answer of what happens here is the British appoint a commission to determine who owns this land. The commission is headed by a British Army officer. And you might think the British are going to say they own the land, but no, they're a little more tricky than that. They say it belongs to the Griqua people here, but then they turn around and strike a deal with them to buy the land from them. Okay, but in either case, it pisses off the Boers of the Orange Free State. Another point that's going to cause, bad blood between the British and the Boers, and lead to the Anglo-Boer War later in the century. Anyway, okay, so now we know kind of where this is happening. So we have the initial diamond discoveries, people flooding into the region. As I said, by a year later, you got 5,000 people working on the mines. 2 years later, 50,000 people working there. Now it says working in the mine because actually there was one mine. Okay, there was one, as I'll show you a picture in just a minute, a large hole. Okay, but then what happens is fragmentation. So you have people staking a claim, literally staking a claim. You've put stakes in the ground and tie ropes, and that's your claim right there. And then you just start digging down. And then by between 1870 and 71, what had been 450 claims, they'll get subdivided into 1,700 separate claims. So you carve off an area, say 20 by 20, right? And then you're not finding anything, so you subdivide your claim and you sell half of it to somebody else, right? Because you need the money, to keep working on your own claim, and then they do the same, and then you're going to end up with claims that are maybe 6 feet, 10 feet across. Well, that's going to be a problem in a lot of ways. Also, because I think I got a picture here. Yeah, the initial diamond digging on these claims was pick and shovel stuff. Guys, primarily, as you see here, the white claim owners using African labor to do the digging, and then they have these screens. They're just pieces of screen like from your window between wooden frames, and then you shake the dirt out and you pick through, hoping to find diamonds. Very low-tech operation, okay? But the problem is they start digging down further and further, and there's problems. I mean, you have a claim, 10, 20 feet on a side. It's hard to dig straight down, okay, and not dig into somebody else's claim. And then as you dig further and further down, they're leaving little walls of dirt between the claims. Of course, those collapse. Then you get down further and you strike groundwater because this is right along the Vaal River. The water table is pretty shallow, and then the whole thing floods, and it was just a mess. So, and on top of that, then they are finding diamonds. Well, what happens is they start finding a lot of diamonds flooding into the market, and the prices drop. So as it says here, a diamond worth 5,000 pounds sterling in 1867, but was by 1872 worth only 200 pounds sterling. Okay, while the price of black unskilled labor at least keeps going up, doubling at least in 1872. So there's a number of economic issues here with the continuation of this mining. So what happens is what's called consolidation. You have certain individuals, one of whom I'll talk about in a minute here, step in and start buying up these individual claims to create consolidated mines. And so you're going to end up then with a single mining company that ends up owning about 3/4 of the claims in the area. And in part that was done so they could start introducing industrial mining. And this is what's known as the Big Hole. This is the original diamond mine there. And it was just a large hole, one of the largest holes cleared just by manual labor in the world. And but as you can see, it filled with water, between rain and the groundwater swelling up and so on. Not really conducive to a mining operation here, right? And that's where consolidation plays a key role, because the consolidation is going to allow the company that owns this stuff then to introduce industrial mining and industry, meaning especially heavy equipment. So what happens then is introduction of industrial mining. By 1872, the Kimberley claim is 80 feet deep. Imagine digging 80 feet down with a pick and shovel. Yeah. By 1874, the mine was 200 feet deep, but it flooded for almost the entire year. So with consolidation, then the company starts bringing in steam engines. In 1877, there had been 16 steam engines. By 1881, there's over 300. Why steam engines? Pumps. They need to pump the water out. Okay. And then by 1879, there's 12 private companies that control 3/4 of the Kimberley mine, and then they're going to start to be bought out by another company, you may have heard of them, called De Beers. De Beers Consolidated Mines is going to come in, and they're under the control of Cecil Rhodes. Mining operation is going to control labor, though, through the use of compounds. Basically, they're like barracks arrangements then, where the workers are kept under control, ostensibly to keep them from smuggling diamonds out, but really so they have control of their labor. And they're, like I said, they're barracks arrangements then, and the African workers are just here and it's all male in these barracks arrangements. And in kind of like an armed camp, and they sign a labor contract, and they're not allowed out until they complete that contract. So here's Cecil Rhodes, Englishman who comes to South Africa and starts long, kind of fascinating story we don't have time for, but starts buying up eventually diamond claims and so on. And this is a picture known as the Colossus of Rhodes. Rhodes trying to create this Cape to Cairo colonization by the British across the continent, and very nearly succeeds. He starts out in 1874 by getting the pumping contract in the mines, then he starts buying mining plots, and then he gets elected to become a member of the Cape Parliament. And then 1888, he founds De Beers Consolidated Mines with financing from the French Rothschilds. And then in 1889, the next year, he founds the British South African Company, which is going to colonize what becomes known as the Rhodesias, today's Zambia and Zimbabwe. And then after the gold discoveries, he founds Consolidated Goldfields. And from 1890 to 96, he becomes Prime Minister of the Cape Colony. So he's a busy guy, and he's active in business and, of course, in politics. And those are going to be very closely related, as we'll see here. Now, let me go back for a quick minute here. So he is going to start buying mining plots on the diamond mines in the 1870s, and then forms De Beers Consolidated Mines in the 1880s, and then 1889, the Consolidated Goldfields, okay? Because like the diamond discoveries, there's going to be huge gold discoveries in South Africa also. But they're a little bit different. Instead of finding diamonds just in the earth and so on like that, the gold discoveries are gold ore. And it's gold ore that is bound up in very hard rock, okay, granite. And in order to get that out, then it requires digging through hard rock and then separating the ore from the rock. And well, not really digging. This is not pick and shovel stuff, okay? This is an industrial operation from the beginning, and it involves a lot of blasting. And we have a kind of a cartoon version here of how the mines work. Number one, they dig this shaft underground, and then they dig or blast actually these what are called stopes, these side channels off of it here, these little tunnels, where until they intersect the reef, or this is the vein of gold ore that runs into the ground. And you can see here there's drilling and blasting, and so they blast out all this rock, and then they have to load it onto carts and buckets and move it out of here. And then they take the ore up for processing, and then smelting, and here we go. So in order to process the ore, though, you have to process over 2 tons of ore to get 3/4 of an ounce of gold. Okay, so obviously that's, well, literally tons of ore, right? Okay, but that's not the only thing. You have to move a further tens of tons of rock to get at the ore. Okay, so it's a very labor-intensive, expensive operation. And as I said, it's going to be industrial from the very beginning, unlike the diamond mines that start out pick and shovel. This is going to require lots of labor and lots of equipment from the very beginning, and that means lots of capital. So who was there in Southern Africa who had mining expertise and lots of capital when the gold was discovered in 1886-87? Cecil Rhodes. Okay, so he's going to become a prime owner and operator of the diamond mines, and a prime owner and operator of the gold mines as well. And as I said, Prime Minister of the Cape Colony. So he is going to be living large here. Okay. Now the gold mining developments, I don't want to get into this, things I already talked about. Here we go. Labor. This is going to be indicative of here. Number of African miners on the gold mines rises from 14,000 in 1890 to less than a decade later, 100,000 workers. As I said, this is going to be very labor intensive and therefore expensive. And the only way really to make this profitable with the capital requirements and the labor requirements is to keep the cost of labor down. All right. So first is recruiting labor, and they're going to recruit labor from surrounding groups, including the Zulu. And by 1909, 80% of the Zulu men from the Natal area are going to be gone from their villages at any one point in time, because they're going to be working around Johannesburg and around the mining operations. But this is also going to require a large labor recruitment from surrounding territories, including Mozambique and Lesotho, something that's going to be mentioned in the Ende Makume article. And we're going to see then where the gold mines are going to be the engine for the South African economy. Not just the mines themselves, but also industrial operations around them. People who are supplying equipment to the mines, people who are supplying food to the mines, people who are supplying dynamite to the mines. Everything that's needed on there is going to obviously have to be produced, transported, and so on. So the mines will be the engine of an industrializing economy in South Africa. Okay. Now, however, it's not all roses here. The mining, and especially this kind of mining operation, is extremely dangerous, especially with all the blasting going on. In 1 year, in the year 1903, you have 5,000 workers who are going to die on the mines in 1 year. Okay, 59% of them from pneumonia and meningitis. 12% almost from intestinal infections, mostly from bad food, because these workers are also going to be kept in closed compounds. right? Where they're not allowed to leave until they fulfill their labor contract. And the housing conditions and the food are going to be almost as bad as the work conditions. Okay? You have almost 6% of these miners are going to die of scurvy. Scurvy. How do you die of scurvy? Okay, well, lack of fresh fruits and vegetables because they're not being fed anything but basically cheap starches. 4% of them from accidents, all that dynamite blasting underground. Then basilosis and tuberculosis, which are two lung diseases. All that blasting underground and all that dust and so on it gets in the lungs. So working on the mines is not an attractive thing to do. So how are they going to get attract workers to come to the mines? Well, we'll see that in the next video. So let me stop there.